If you would, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of April 15th.
Oh, wait,
I move we approve the minutes of April.
oh, could you hold on just a moment, please?
We're going to pause just like a VCR.
In motion?
That makes me old. We're gonna pause like a, what do you call it?
Mr. Chair, what is a VCR?
Smart Alex.
I'll let our.
That was pretty cute.
Please.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Chair.
Brenda,
What?
you made the motion.
I did. I moved.
I seconded. I think.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Trustee
Mr.
Harrison?
Chair, it's not discussion, but I observed a particular typo, which I believe has been corrected. And Vicki has indicated that that's in the minutes now. That's been corrected, so.
Okay, sir.
All those in favor of the minutes as they have been presented tonight?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes have been approved. Next item on the agenda, glad to have you with us, Dr. Schaefer. We threw you out of the room earlier. No, we never let you in, did we?
You've taken it more than
Anyway, Dr. Schaefer, if you would, please bring us up to date on the foundation agreement. This would be the first reading.
Be happy to, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good evening, everyone else. You are correct. This is the first reading of the draft operating agreement between LCCC and the Laramie County Community College Foundation. As most of you know, I believe, are aware, the current agreement will expire June 30th of this summer, at which time we'll need to execute a new agreement to continue the development relationship that we have with the foundation. Much of this agreement in terms of its structure is similar to what we've had in place for the last 3 years. I do want to point out just a few things that are different about this agreement. Before I do that, I'd also just like to say that this agreement, well, it's, I would say 95% complete. There is still some conversation going between your legal counsel and the foundation's legal counsel, Mr. Greg Dykman. Predominantly, Tara, would you agree on wording and some semantics? The only substantive issue really deals with confidentiality and sharing of information between the two. And I think those things can be resolved. Is that fair, Tara?
I'd say it's 98% complete and there's really no outstanding issues. It's just, just finessing that confidentiality language.
We'll work through that. So some of the changes with this agreement specifically, the first change is that this actually sets terms for an agreement for 6 years. So the current agreement was a 3-year agreement between the foundation and the college. This sets essentially terms for 6 years. Now it does have a mandatory review after the conclusion or before the conclusion of the 3rd year, when you as a board and the foundation board will have to actually formally act to enact or to authorize the second 3 years of this agreement. And so you'll see there's actually 2 signature pages within the agreement, one for years 1 through 3 and the other for years 4 through 6. But the terms are spelled out for the duration of the 6 years. So that's one change. The second change is in regard to the development fees that the college provides to the foundation. So within this operating agreement, we essentially hire the foundation to do fundraising and development at a discounted rate. For the past 3 years, we have had a flat annual rate that went to the foundation. Going forward, this will actually, next year will stay flat, and after that there is a 2.5% escalator each year from what they would get through this agreement. And the real motivating factor behind that, to be honest with you, is the close interaction and relation between the foundation and the college. And so because the employment relationship is so tight and their proximity are so tight, oftentimes when we enact things like pay increases or other types of things, we're able to do that in times because of increasing revenues from the local district or from the state. But the foundation has essentially been on a fixed revenue source for the duration of this contract. That will help them with some of those changes. But the overall goal over the 6-year period is to encourage them to continue to generate the amount of revenue that sits within their unrestricted or undesignated funds so that over time they can become more and more self-sustaining. So the escalator starting in the second year is the second thing that's a little bit different, whereas the agreement we're under now has just been a flat number every single year. Then the third big change I would say that's in here really has to deal with the land transition. As you know, going through the different building projects that we've had on campus, we were able to sort of nail down land ownership, and a significant portion of the land here at LCCC is held in ownership by the LCCC Foundation. So there's a clause within this agreement essentially that allows for the transfer, the sale of that land. A portion of that will be from a one-time payment for that land, and the rest of it will essentially be given to the college, with the only caveat that should the college decide to develop the land for any commercial purposes in the future, that we would agree to a revenue sharing. A percentage of the net revenues for any type of commercial development would go to 20% would go to the foundation, 80% would go to the college. Other than that, it's pretty well straightforward. It talks about employment relationships. It talks about the college developing fundraising priorities, development priorities that I present to the foundation board every year to guide them in terms of the philanthropy that they pursue. And it's a structure that has worked, I think, exceptionally well over the past 3 years. And with this agreement, I think we'll continue that positive relationship for 6 years into the future. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have as an overview. Happy to answer any questions that I can. And again, this is your first reading. It is slated to go to the foundation board on the 14th of May, and then come back to you on May 27th for your final approval of it.
Trustee Erickson.
Mr. Chairman, as your treasurer, I've reviewed and been part of the negotiations over the time frame, and I would hope that we would support the contract as Dr. Joe has presented it to us.
Appreciate those comments. Any other issues, concerns, or questions?
Mr. Chair, Joe, the foundation is selling 216.5 acres. Can you remind me where that is, what that is?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Little, that is essentially the land that's directly, there's two chunks that's a scientific word, two parcels, major parcels that have been identified. Roughly they're 88 acres, and I want to say 117 acres, somewhere in there. It's predominantly the undeveloped land at the perimeter of the campus buildings at this point.
Okay.
Some of it is within the Bowman Loop Road, but most all of it is on the outside of that. So the area where we currently graze stock, and it's basically undeveloped.
Okay,
There's a helpful exhibit attached to the agreement, which is marked Exhibit C and D, which shows that map.
okay, that's great, Tara, thank you for that, thank you.
Hearing no other comments, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. And that would be the Ludden Library Learning Commons, and look forward to hearing the information about that. And I believe Dr. Schaefer, would you like to introduce our presenter?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I would be delighted to do that. Just as a quick overview, as we've discussed in the past, and certainly with the Facilities and Finance Committee, we've been working on 3 level 1 plans, the first stage of planning for new facilities here on campus. One of the projects, in fact, the project we'll hear about now, is actually a revisit and an expanded plan from something you considered about a year ago. But these, again, are your first view and your first reading, and really my first in-depth reading on a couple of them in preparation for an approval that you would have on May 27th so that we can actually submit them to the Wyoming Community College Commission. So we have 3 fine folks with us here tonight to present the level 1 plans, and we will start off with Martha Bennett from Bennett, Wagner & Grody on the Ludden Library and Learning Commons. So Martha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As Dr. Schaefer mentioned, it was actually exactly a year ago that we presented on a modest addition to the Ludden Library and a renovation of the existing library that was going to be donor funded for a total project cost of about $3 million, 2.5 to 3. Since then, it was determined to go for state funding and to go for a much larger project that coincides more closely with the results of the task force report that's now a couple of years old that your staff and faculty put together on the expansion needs for the Levin Library. So this project in a nutshell has now grown to an $8 million project of state-funded money. It will be, instead of a 2,000 square foot addition, it's 13,394 square foot addition, and then the renovation of the entire library. This says we're expected to maybe start construction in 17. I think Tim was saying maybe 18, but we do have some inflation figured in on the budget. So much of the report is a synopsis of the task force report, which is also, I think, attached to our submittal. One of their biggest concerns that although the library people traffic had doubled since they had previously done an addition onto the library, that the data searches had tripled. The people had doubled and data searches had tripled, that they could no longer accommodate all of the students. When they all came at once, there weren't enough chairs. And so they really had a deficit in seating for the library. In the task force report, it talks about the 21st century learning environment where, from a technological and an academic point of view, the library will now be a hub for learning. So they call it a learning commons and library. And the learning commons included several major components. First, the Student Success Center, which when it moved into the library actually squished down into smaller square footages. So now we've brought that up to a little bit more than what they had before they moved into the library. The Writing and Communications Center will also be expanded. There will be math tutoring as part of the Student Success Center, and tutoring in every subject. The Language Lab will be brought into the library. We will greatly expand the number of group study rooms, because this was, of course, on the students, one of the students' highest lists of priorities. And one of the student rooms is a place where students can practice multimedia presentations, so they can practice these kinds of presentations. We will also finally have a home for the Center for Teaching and Learning, which I know the faculty is very excited about, and that will kind of evolve as it goes along. We've worked with them to develop a program for that, but since they've never had a home, I'm sure it will evolve a little bit. And I know that in some places it's called a 24-hour computer lab, but I think for now, realistically, we're calling it an extended hour computer lab, so that as we figure out a way where we can safely have computers available to students past hours that the library is open, whether by proctor or TV control for safety. We figured out a way to do that. And then also vending near the library, especially when Starbucks is closed. So I'm sure you can read all the fine print here, but in a nutshell, showing what we have is existing, what we're adding is new in both the library portion and the learning commons portion, the net assignable square feet, and then the grossing up factors, which is corridors, walls, toilets. You can see that it doubled because, in fact, as we expanded the library, we hit the ceiling at which we had to expand the toilets. So the toilets doubled in size on this project. So we ended up with a gross square footage of a total of 32,954 square feet. The renovation being almost 20,000 and the new construction being 13,300. So you all are familiar with the existing plan, the tiny little Learning Commons Student Success Center and the Writing Communications Center, which is just a little tiny part of the big instruction room. Everything is pretty cramped. I'm sure most of you know where this is located, and in the master plan that this is taken from, it shows exactly where we're planning to add on to the library, out to the north. So here's the concept, and I don't know if that color is reading really well, but there's a hatched portions that show the additions and the remaining portions that are unhatched, that'll be the renovation areas. So the part out to the north, up to the service drive for the cafeteria will be included. That is both some study rooms, some collections, and a lot of casual and table seating. And then infilling between the building and the lovely sort of park that's been developed right in the area. So it'll be facing the park, and then the little slot between the two buildings will also be part of the addition. And then, as the master plan had talked about, having a better entrance and presence on the pedestrian mall down the middle. Now I think people kind of struggle and try to come in the patio door instead of the door that's actually into the building. Also, as far as what's part of the new Learning Commons area is the computer area, both the public computers and this room to the right that it is the extended hour computer room, but they're all accessible by students. We have the Student Success Center and the Writing and Communications Center. The Language Lab is now in the library, and there's Center for Teaching and Learning inside the library. So in the areas between are the stacks ringed around the perimeter, and in certain areas between the stacks with both computers, tables and chairs, and some soft seating also. And I just wanted to show the area that would be available for studying, some group study rooms, some tables and chairs, and some extended hour computer usage that would be available for extended hour study as part of the expansion. So the budget, because I know some of you will be shocked, because on the last report where we had just 2,000 square feet of addition was almost $2 million. And there was no economy of scale whatsoever because it was such a tiny addition. You know, to set up for new construction is sort of a baseline price. And then whether you do 2,000 square feet or 13,000 square feet, it gets exponentially smaller cost per square foot the larger your project is. So even though our square footage of new construction is 13,000 square feet, the new construction is just $2.7 million. The renovation 2.8 for a total of 5.5. And then we've added an inflation figure so that we don't get caught by surprise if this gets delayed a couple of years. A generous offer for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, just because there is a possibility that we will need to buy a lot more tables and chairs and computers. And we'd like to make sure that we had enough money to really furnish the library technologically the way it's been envisioned by the library folks. So the total project cost is just under the $8 million target to $7.9 million. Questions? I think I did actually attach the task report with our submittal report too, to give you an idea of what all was asked for in the report. We've kind of hit all of their targets now.
Dr. Schaefer?
Mr. Chairman, just one quick question, Martha. So I have a 4-year-old, and so we are always aware of where the bathrooms are because we can't go too far from a bathroom. I think Trustee Barker understands what I'm talking about with his young children as well. Tell me why, with the proximity of the lavatories just down the hall outside of the private dining areas just to the east, what is it that necessitates such a large lavatory installation in this project? Are those just too far away from the building to meet code? Is that what it is?
The way that your sort of long, narrow buildings are sort of regarded per code is that there's sections of buildings that are regarded as far as fire protection, exiting, bathrooms, allowable area, all of that. And so they're chunks as you move down the corridors that really are almost treated as a separate building. And so this building is treated at the corridor doors right by the front of the library doors, all the way down the hall to the ramp to the next building, is kind of treated by code as a building. So the toilets really need to respond to the occupancy level of the library. I'm not sure that it's a frivolous addition.
Like I said, I have a 4-year-old. There's never too many bathrooms in proximity, so thank
It's
you.
a necessary addition.
Oh, yes, yeah, for ADA also.
Not ADA right now.
Yeah. Distance to bathrooms is very important.
Trustee Erickson, did you have a question? If you
Well,
don't.
I have a comment. I have a comment and a question. The legislature authorized in this last session moving forward with level 1, and we're financing that with our monies. And I'm 100% behind this project. However, I'm somewhat stunned by the escalation of the cost that was originally presented to us. And I realize that there's going to be more in this current plan than what was presented to us back in a year ago. My question, and I guess my question is more to you, Dr. Joe. I think I heard Martha say that she was expecting the legislature to provide dollars for this. And I'm not so sure that that's all that feasible, but what's the projected funding for this? I know back a year ago, we were looking at some private monies to do the renovation of the library. And instead of the 2.5 million to 3 million, we're now up to 8 million with a soft cost of 1.3 million. I don't know what that is, but I'm real curious as to where we have an expectation that we're going to have money to fund this.
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Erickson, I'll let Martha talk about the soft costs in a second, but a couple of things just to back up. So when we originally pulled a group together to do the prospectus on the Ludden Library Learning Commons, we asked them to look at what are the functions that need to be housed within there, what are the requirements, what type of activities would we actually want to and need to serve our students at their current numbers. They went through that process, developed a prospectus. Afterwards, we brought Martha's team on to essentially help us design or develop a level 1 with that. And I think it became painfully clear early on in that process that for the price tag, for us to do it on our own, about $2.5 million, the reality was we would get a basic renovation and a very, very small addition to the Ludden Library Learning Commons that simply wouldn't accommodate the things that the team essentially said we need to have in there. And so as we went through the year and as we looked at that project specifically, we engaged in conversations with the library staff and with others. And it just became clear that if all we were going to get for $2.5 million was the 2,000 square feet and a basic renovation, it really wasn't worth doing it. And so that led to a debate about and a conversation about, do we wait and ask for an entire new library building, or is there something that's more feasible? And really what was most feasible, and I think most palatable to the group, was to go back and look at the original prospectus developed by the group and say, let's go back to it and let's see what would that cost and what would it essentially look like. And so that's essentially what Martha has presented to you today. What I would point out that for, even though the price goes from 2.5 million to just under 8, the cost per square feet has to have been reduced substantially because of the additional property. Because just if you run through 2,000 to get 6 times the 2,000 square feet with the escalator, under that cost price, long story short, much more bang for your buck when you start adding more space in because of the economy of scale. From a funding perspective, though, this is going to be part of a request and a strategy to go to essentially the commission and the state to ask for funding for 2 projects. A proportion of this 8 million for the Learning Commons, and the structure we've been doing in the past is moving these forward, asking half from the state and saying we'll cover half from local funds. And so that's what would change here. We would go back with an updated level 1, which essentially negates the level 1 we submitted last time, asking for half of the funding, so $4 million from the state, and the other 4 would come from local funds, most likely a mixture of other funds we would pursue with the Fine and Performing Arts Building, which you'll hear about, as well as the local funds that we currently have or anticipate having from private donors. So that's kind of a long answer, but that's the strategy that's sort of being employed to try to get this project done, as well as the Fine and Performing Arts project done. And Martha, do you want to just comment on soft costs quick?
Yes, and first let me say that the $2.5 million, we worked very carefully with the college administration to help us fund out of some different pots of budget money, some of the soft costs, some of the furnishings, and some of the infrastructure costs, so that we could still keep it down to the $2.5 million. This, on the other hand, has everything in it and nothing taken from anybody else's budget or surpluses. So the inflation was figured at about 4%, compounded 4% per year for the several years until midpoint of construction, which would be in 2018, I think. Soft costs, we're going to have to relocate the main gas entry meter point into the building, which is something we stayed away from in the first go round. But now with the expansion, we had to expand where that meter comes into the building. So that's a cost that is sort of outside standard construction costs. The surveys, the soils report, materials testing during construction, the engineering and architects fees, the construction management fees. There are more. I could actually get you a whole list of things that come under the soft costs.
Oh, you're doing okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. Martha, what's FFE?
Furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
Thank you.
So, and again, trying to be an all-in price, we have noted that a lot of the furniture that we were going to reuse in the first go-round, now we can look at funding new furniture where some of it has seen better days and we really need to move on. It's different types of furniture now too, because so much of it is with computers, and the earlier furniture didn't really accommodate technology as well as it should.
Any other questions? We appreciate your presentation, and the public, we have in the past taken any public comment on this. If anyone had a question or, okay. I think at this point we will move on. And again, thank you very much.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, as Martha close out, I'll just do a quick introduction of item B on the residence hall and the CDC. As you know, within your building forward plan, which is the focus, new facilities element derived from your campus master plan, we've been moving through the priorities, the University Student Center, the Flex Tech, and then now tonight you're hearing about the other two new construction priorities, which include a new residence hall as well as the fine and performing arts building. And so tonight with us from Tobin and Associates is Matthew Trendenick, and he's going to kind of walk us through a level 1 plan based off of some of the early designs and plans that we had probably in the late 2009, 2010 through 2011 with the master plan that I think Tobin did originally, updated to fit sort of the current picture of what we could feasibly be looking at for additional residence halls. This one also does include a model for the Children's Discovery Center. That is an element in your campus master plan. It's an auxiliary enterprise, but it was something that we thought might have a relationship with additional residence halls, since that will essentially have to be a lease revenue bond funded for the most part, other revenue sources. So Matthew, I don't want to take your thunder. I guess I should turn it over to you before I do your presentation. So.
Thank you. So as was mentioned, this is both the residence hall and the Children's Discovery Center. So we'll start with the residence hall. And we were calling this phase 1 as we looked at it, because in the master plan, there are several buildings, several phases to the future residence halls. This would be the first building according to the master plan. And it would essentially replace the current west residence hall. So its sizing would need to take that into consideration. And timing wise, it would need to be built before the west residence hall is demolished. And then that west residence hall would need to operate for some period of time until it's financially ready to be torn down, and then this would essentially take its place. So a few of the reasons for this project, in addition to replacing that facility, are to accommodate increasing enrollment, as well as to provide some variety in the housing options. Right now, all of the housing options are fairly similar. They're all suite style units. And there was a study or a survey done in 2012 when I think the Heinz building was being looked at. And the results of that study showed that a lot of students are looking for apartment style housing. And additionally, there seems to be a need for family style housing. So if you are looking to accommodate non-traditional students that might have families, or students who just want an apartment style versus a traditional suite style unit, those options aren't available at LCCC. And some folks with the housing group thought that that might dissuade some people from attending the school. And so it would potentially help in recruitment as well to have these options. The intent is to look to about between 120 and 180 beds is what we were originally looking at. The scheme we were looking at the end was 152 beds. Would need a parking lot to go along with that, in addition to the current parking lot at the East Residence Hall. This would have to go through the Laramie County permitting process, and it would be funded by a revenue bond. So the location, similar to the master plan, is in the southwest corner of the campus, right across from right adjacent to the existing residence halls. And again, that is pretty much where it's shown on the master plan, so it's in keeping with those ideas. Running through some of the level 1 requirements that require vetting of property ownership and some other site-related issues. The property is owned by LCCC as opposed to the property owned by the foundation, which you were speaking of earlier. This map just shows that it's not in the floodplain. There are a few more maps like this in the study that just show it's essentially a suitable site. There aren't any major roadblocks to developing this site. Utilities, this is pretty fuzzy, but this is from the overall utility plan for the campus. And so it says within a reasonable distance of all of the necessary utilities for this building. And there is existing capacity with the physical plant for the current residence hall that could take on some or part of this new building. So I mentioned that there are 2 unit types that would be included in this building. One would be a more traditional suite style, similar to what's existing now. Another is what we were calling the flex style, which would be apartment or family style housing. So this is one version of the traditional unit, which is pretty similar. Actually, this is identical to the East Residence Hall right now. And what we did for this study is we looked at a lot of examples around the region, compared that to what was here, talked to the residents, facilities folks, and it seemed like we could tighten that unit up a little bit to try and minimize the square footage of the overall building. So this is a similar unit. It only has one restroom instead of two. Some of the spaces are not quite as generous, but in comparing to other regional facilities, the current suites are fairly generous, and it seemed like they could be squeezed down a little bit. This unit would be the flex style unit, and so it accommodates either 4 students in an apartment style situation, 2 per sleep study room, or a family where it could be 1 student with their spouse and kids or whatever the situation might be. And the main difference between this unit and the others is that there's a full kitchenette and washer dryer. So students who want to have the ability to cook their own meals and wash their own clothes in their room could have a unit like this, which is not currently an option in the current facilities. So what we looked at as far as the breakdown of the total spaces, you probably can't read all of these, but we run through some of the typical spaces that would be required regardless, mechanical rooms, some of the service spaces, some of the shared spaces, and we use the existing East Residence Hall as somewhat of a template. So you have some of the other laundry rooms, reception areas, meeting rooms, some of those amenities for the students in that shared space list. And then the main spot we were looking to modify the size of the building is in the living units. And this is where the building is still potentially in flux. Since it would be a revenue bond, the size of the building would have to be sized to match the revenue of the building itself versus the cost that could be funded. So we were going back and forth quite a bit. We ended up leaving it at a, what we were calling sort of a wish list type of space program. And as it moves into level 2, the numbers might change and modify to see what really works with the pro forma of the building itself. But currently we're showing 28 of those traditional suites, 10 of the flex units, which would give us 152 beds and a gross square footage of 43,023 square feet. And at this time, we started looking at costs, but again, since we were in a sort of a fluctuating mode as to what would really make sense for the building as a financial piece of property, we were bouncing around. This program, depending on the square foot cost you plug in, we were looking at a range between the upper 200s and lower 300s, would be between 11 and 13 million as a range. But that would need to be nailed down a little tighter as it was understood what the rental cost, I guess, for each room would be and what the revenue would be per room per year. And then that would help to size the building, and you could play with the number of units based on that. Moving on to the Children's Discovery Center. So this, I would imagine everybody knows what that is. It exists on campus now. It's a early childhood education program. And so it provides those services to the general public as well as LCCC staff and students. But in addition to that service, it also provides some collaboration with LCCC programs. I think just a few are early childhood education, nursing, dental hygiene, psychology. I think there are several other programs that have coursework that aligns and cooperates with the Children's Discovery Center. So LCCC students will come over and observe the children and the instructors as a part of their coursework. And one of the primary reasons for needing a new building for this function is right now they're split into 2 spots on campus. Excuse me. One of which is above the auto diesel classroom and lab, which is not an ideal location because of the potential fumes. The biggest concern is just having these functions broken into 2 places. They have students and staff going back and forth. There's a lot of coordination that needs to happen between the 2, and co-location would really help them function much better. We looked at a couple of similar facilities at UW and Casper College. What the group at LCCC is looking for is very similar to a couple of those, especially the UW project. A larger facility that's more suitable for their needs, especially with regard to the kitchen facilities, would make it would give them a better opportunity to be a financially self-sufficient program. One thing that will be considered moving forward is classroom sizing. We've sized it so far based on Department of Education standards, but that would be something that would need to be continue to be evaluated. The permitting for this project would include the county permit process, but since it's a child care facility for over 10 kids, it would need to go to the state fire marshal and also to the Department of Health. And so those would need to be considered in design and construction. And this project is also talking about a revenue bond. Location for this project is just east of the residence halls. Right now there's a modular building, I believe, sitting on the site where this would be. Again, it aligns with the master plan location for this project. And a lot of the other slides and other images in the report that look through the floodplains and other site-related issues would be the same for this project, being in such close proximity. Then looking at the space program for this facility. Same thing as before, a lot of the service spaces up above. And then in addition to 8 classrooms, there are other service spaces, the administrative spaces, a large multipurpose room, et cetera, to fill out the building, which all brings the total gross square footage to 12,000 square feet, 12,170. And with an estimated round cost of about 2.7 million. And again, that is flexible depending on classroom sizing and some of the service spaces that could be modified in level 2. So are there any questions on either of these projects?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
I am seeing a total, I am looking on page 5
Okay.
of the report, and I see a total net square feet of 10,344. And I think you just said 12 or something, right?
Yes.
So can you point me to where that number is in this report?
Well, I'm seeing an error that there's a portion of this spreadsheet that's cut off in the
Oh,
printed report, so that there's a
Okay.
grossing factor just below the net square feet that shows an additional
Uh-huh.
1,826
Yep.
square feet.
uh-huh.
So there should be one more line that's been cut off
Oh,
where that is added to the net square feet to bring the
and
gross
so
up to 12.
that's the total of 12,000, say that number again for me.
12,170.
Thank you.
Just a perspective and maybe more for Dr. Schaefer. I'm wondering, I understand that maintenance cost is not covered for either dorms or for the CDC. And I'm wondering what kind of costs we're looking at down the road in terms of those costs and how we would intend to pay for those.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and I may rely on Vice President Hoagland here, essentially within the financing structure for these types of facilities, the auxiliaries, we would actually have to build in some type of sinking fund associated with the project so that we could at least handle the major maintenance, the maintenance aspects of the facility. Tim, Carol, is that correct?
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Well, let me follow up with just a couple more. If we're adding this, and I think back to the master plan, and I kind of consider what we heard tonight with the library, and I'm wondering, was or is there a possibility for consideration of expanding the current space that's by the circle where the One Children's Discovery Center is located? Would there be any efficiencies to that, or is it so far from the dorms we take away from part of the concept we're looking at?
We didn't look at expanding that facility, and I guess I can't say with much confidence, since we didn't look at that, what the downside would be.
I would remember from the master plan that we had looked at the CDC being on the west end of the campus because we were looking at the, let's say, family housing of some nature over there. but I was just asking the question as a possibility as we move forward.
And I do know one thing we did talk about was the fact that once the Child Development Center moves out, that space could go back to educational use. And so I think that was part of the driver for not exploring that site, was wanting to get that back into educational use.
Trustee Merrill?
Chairman Mosier. I believe one of the other things that we were taking into consideration was the drop-off, the ability of a quick drop-off for the students from the community, moving it to the west side. So not only would the people from the residence hall be having access to it, but the people in the community would also have better access.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, did I hear you say we're going to demolish a building?
Yes,
Which one?
the
The old one?
the older West Residence Hall.
Okay, and there's how many beds in that facility?
I believe.
And we're looking at building a residency of 180? So
The-
we're losing 80, we're going to increase by 100?
And that's phase one. So there would be other phases, and I don't know the timing of phase two, for instance.
Phase
Because-
2 for another residency hall, is that what you're saying?
Yes. Because there would be a period of time where the West Residence Hall would stay in operation. So you would have the newer Residence Hall and the existing West Residence Hall. But after a period of, I forget if it's 6 or 9 years or so, the West Hall would come down.
Mr. Chairman,
Schaefer.
Trustee Erickson, I'll save you a little bit, Matthew, here.
Thank you.
The 2011 campus master plan actually slates the West Residence Hall to be demolished as part of.
That's the older one?
That's the older hall, that is correct. Because of the need for revenue associated with students in that hall, as well as the place to put them, what we would have to do is build the additional 120 to 180 beds, operate the West Hall until any debt associated with the East Hall, if I'm getting this right, would be basically paid off, which would lessen our reliance on the revenue stream associated with the beds in the West Hall, which would allow us to take that one down and then likely move into the next phase of the expansion of the residence hall. And that's likely to be, would you say, 7 to 10 years, roughly? Roughly out there. So it's not like we're knocking down the hall in the next couple of years, but it is one in our master plan that's slated to actually be demolished and taken offline.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee DuBois?
is there still talk, Dr. Schaefer, of having a private company come in and build the dorm and have it privately owned?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Du Bois, I think that there's numerous options on the table. I know that Vice President Hoagland, Mr. McNamara, and others have been actually looking into the different options. We heard of a creative option from one of our vice president candidates yesterday on campus of real estate investment trusts to do some of that. I think those are things we would continue to explore, especially as we get into more firmly developing the pro formas associated with the building as we get to level 2 and more complex planning. There are some options out there. That industry is changing. There are considerable risks that are associated with that type of relationship. I think the preferred approach would be a lease revenue bond with the building authority to do this project. But it's a long answer to say that most likely we're looking at a revenue bond solution, but it's possible that there are other creative options that would help us manage the construction project as well as the financing.
Trustee Erickson?
Mr. Chair, just to expand on what Dr. Jones said, I think it's important to point out that a revenue bond does not have any impact on the taxpayer. It is solely debt service through revenues that come from the building itself.
Thank you, Trustee Erickson. One last question. Since we talk about two types of rooms, one for, I believe, family compatible, the other one not, is there a perception about how many rooms would be set up one way and how many the other way, or is this dorm to be all of one and the future design is for another type?
What we were looking at, so I guess in a way it would be 3 types of rooms. The traditional suite style, of which we plugged in 28 units, would be just like the current halls. And then we were calling it a flex unit. We would have 10 units. And that would be the other type, which could be either family or apartment style. And there wouldn't really be much change to the unit other than how it's billed, I guess, or how it's marketed to the students. And I think we talked a little bit in the report. We certainly talked a lot to the team about how the way the building and these units are designed and sited could help to make some of those units more family friendly and others a bit more apartment style student friendly, but that they would be designed in a way that they could function as either. So over the years, if you have more families versus more traditional students who just want an apartment style unit, it would be fairly easy to transition back and forth with that unit, is the intent. So does that answer the question?
Yes, it did. I would just simply say later on tonight, we'll hear a little bit about a conference activity that Trustee Erickson and Dr. Schaefer and I attended. And I'm just thinking about the need that was suggested there for the type of housing. And to me, this only speaks to the fact that we have a greater need for this type of housing for the kinds of folks who are going to utilize the needs that we can fulfill here at the college. So I like the innovative approach there.
And one thing I did leave out that's occurring to me now, and this might be part of what you're referring to, but another reason for that type of unit is a lot of non-traditional students who are coming back for a short-term program that's 9 months or a semester. I think there are some options, have a difficult time finding, say, an apartment in town. And so this might be a way to provide something to those students who might not be looking for a dorm room, but they're looking for an apartment that they can't get a one semester lease on in town. So that's just another need.
Very important one. Appreciate your comments on that. Any other questions? Hearing none, Dr. Schaefer, you want to move us along? And again, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
I would be happy to. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the grand finale tonight for the level ones, it seems fitting that it would be a conversation about the Fine and Performing Arts building here at LCCC. And we're excited to have Chris Weinman back from Simple Brown, who has been living with this project like we have for many years, I think, or at least aware of it. And he's going to share with you the updated, renewed level 1 for the Fine and Performing Arts building. So, Chris, once you get booted up there, I will turn the floor over to you.
While he's booting that up, I would simply say that thanks to Trustee Little and others who worked on the committee to try to move this forward and get things happening again. And our retiring faculty person, I think, somewhere I thought. Yes, I thought she was here earlier, but she left. But also, a lot of yes, this is finals time. Anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for your efforts in that area.
Great. Mr. Chairman, trustees, President Schaefer, thank you. As the president indicated, it was my pleasure to work with faculty and staff back in 2005, 2006 on the first look at a facility of this nature. And so it was great to come back and move this ahead. You've had a steering committee active since August of last year that has included some representation from the community. They submitted a prospectus March 23rd, and so we have been able to take advantage of that information and have met with that group during this process, and we're certainly indebted to a good deal of the work that they have done. Coming into our process, the working assumptions were that we were talking about a building of 43,000 gross square feet, that we were primarily replacing existing visual and performing arts space on the campus with the addition of creating a formal performance venue, a theater that you really don't have right now. You've currently got 22,604 square feet of existing space of this type on the campus, and so you were looking at some incremental growth there. Revisiting all of that, in 2015, we're talking about a 400-seat main theater that is balanced to meet the needs of both music and theater performance. The support spaces necessary for such a facility. Instructional spaces for the performing arts programs, theater and music. The gallery, the move of the Clay Gallery, new lobby, and the visual arts instructional spaces. So it would essentially be taking the visual and performing arts programs out of the Western Fine Arts wing of your current facility, putting them in a new building, and then adding the new theater performance space to that. As we work through the space program on that in kind of big divisions of space, the 400-seat theater itself and its support spaces are about 8,000 square feet. The gallery and lobby space are about 4,700 square feet. Music spaces, nearly 7,000 square feet. Theater instructional spaces, 4,200 square feet. A fabrication shop, which meets both the needs of the visual arts programs and the theater program. So both for scenery construction and for three-dimensional and sculpture work. This is a collaboration that those programs are interested in doing together. 1,800 square feet. Visual arts space of 7,400 square feet, and offices for the associated faculty for these at 15,600. That gets us to an assignable or net square footage number of just under 35,000 and a gross square footage number of nearly 52,000 square feet. These kinds of buildings are commonly not as efficient as regular classroom buildings. We have wider hallways for moving large objects. We've got lots of loading going on. You're moving things like costume racks and hampers and scenery and things. It's just very difficult to make them as efficient as some other building types can be. Here is a conceptual diagram.
If you would just hold for a second. We have a question, trustee.
Chris, once again, I'm not seeing numbers on this handout that we have.
Okay.
Page 2 at the bottom. It says 30,420 square feet. Is that incorrect?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yes, one of the impacts of the math error that we uncovered over the weekend was that was incorrect as well.
So that top number is 34,620?
That is correct.
And what's the bottom number again, please?
The bottom is 51,930.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The conceptual layout that you're seeing here essentially places the new performance venue, which is likely to be in the neighborhood of 50 feet tall, in the center of the building, ringed by a series of 1- and 2-story spaces. And so if I start over here at the left, the most important space in the building, aside from the restrooms that you've already talked about regarding the library, typically these projects become all about restrooms and loading docks. And so I'm going to start with the loading dock. So over here on what would be the west side of the building, loading and deliveries with the ability to take materials straight into the stage or turn left to the visual arts, which would probably on the first floor be ceramics because that's heavy, dirty stuff, or to turn right into the fabrication shop. And so as we work our way around the space then, we have dressing rooms, wardrobe and costumes, and theater ensemble classrooms. So those are the theater-related spaces that would have immediate access to the stage. Then we move to the public area, the lobby, facing more or less directly to the east and the available parking lot. Well, I'll show you a copy of the master plan for the campus, and this coincides very, very directly with that. Gallery off of the lobby, and then taking advantage of the north light across the northern face of the building, visual arts here on the ground floor, faculty offices on the ground floor, then a music wing here, which are likely to be tall single-story spaces. And then on the upper level, basically we would have a second floor in this area for visual arts space. These would be things like painting and drawing, again with the north light, and some of the smaller music rooms like the music practice rooms, piano lab, and technical lab. So it's a mix of 1- and 2-story space, but we believe it's possible to come up with a very efficient layout. And also both from, as we look at it from the master plan, here's the footprint of the building located where the master plan had indicated this would go. And what that stacking of 2 stories of space on the north side does is to provide approaching audience members and gallery guests, folks from the community, with a very attractive face of the building that helps to wrap that tall 50-foot volume of the main performance space. And so as you work your way around the building, that would be tall on the north side, and then the lobby and entry here would be sheltered on the southeast, facing the interior of the campus. You'd have the nice relationship to the parking here in the center for evening performances, and we'd be able to screen the loading coming from the north side to the west there. So we think it's a good set of diagrammatic relationships and adjacencies in terms of the collaborations between the programs, the areas that are shared. That fabrication shop becomes a nice overlap between the theater folks and the visual arts folks. And then the lobby has good access both to the gallery, to the performance venue, and also to the music and theater spaces. So the corrected opinion of probable cost that we gave you is $25 million. I apologize. I know that the jump from 16 to $25 million is a dramatic one. And that has everything to do with looking at the costs from net square feet to gross square feet. What we have done methodology-wise is to go back and look at comparable visual and performing arts projects that we have been involved in since 2010 that include, as I said, both visual and performing arts space, and to look at the components of those that are relevant to what you're planning to build here in terms of the art studios, the fabrication shop, a 400-seat venue, the music and theater spaces, and to essentially break it down into components and compare against those actual projects where we have got bid costs or very recent estimates, and to be able to compile those into a cost model for your project. And so that's how we got to what we have gotten for you. We have certainly seen a significant amount of escalation recently in these types of projects. Cost-wise, there is very little about a building of this type that is off the shelf. So in terms of mechanical equipment and ventilation, we pay for premium systems for acoustical reasons and for ventilation of visual arts studios and those kinds of things. We pay for premium electrical systems because of all the performance systems and technology that go into the building. And we pay for premium structure because the long spans and irregular ceiling heights of things like the music instructional studio, the theater rehearsal classroom, and the theater itself are all irregular. We don't have a single room that is the same size and shape as another one in the building. And so they tend to be premium cost items from a structural standpoint as well. So with that, I'd certainly entertain questions or clarification requests from you. Brenda?
Mr. Chairman, Chris, I'm going to have several questions.
By all
Because
means.
this project is near and dear to my heart, as it is Trustee DuBois, and I think Trustee Worker as well. 487 a square feet is really expensive. And I know what you're saying, the uniqueness of the building and the unique requirements of the building cause it to be expensive. And I've been a part of those discussions where I said, do not cut cost on acoustics.
Right.
I mean, I've been, do not cut cost on lighting. I've been a part of those discussions, so I'm well aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Let me interject just because I think it may be helpful. I didn't break out. You do find in the more detailed breakdown that is in the report, this is a number that includes equipment. And we have got, I think, nearly $2 million of specialized performance equipment in this building. Okay. Lighting, audio, the rigging for the stage, those kinds of things. So this is not just construction cost of the building, it includes that equipment as well.
That's line 11, the almost 3 million, that's like the theater lighting.
That's correct.
Track lighting for the artwork,
that's
et cetera. So yes. That's fly space, fly wheels, right?
Yep.
That kind of stuff. Okay. Okay. So I'm hesitant to say we need to cut down the quality of anything. Mm-hmm. I'm hesitant to say anything about that, but 25 million is also a lot of money. And we need the community to back us on this. And So what it led me to do was look at just the space itself that you have written out. And so I have basically two questions. I want to give you some questions on space. I guess I have two categories of questions. The dressing room space seems high. The music instrument storage space seems high. The wardrobe costume space seemed right. I wondered if we could put the music library space in with the instrument storage. The lobby is, I mean, that's a lovely size of space. Whether we could cut any of that down. So I want some justification about the space. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, now it left my brain. When you said that we have discovered that the construction of these types of buildings or construction costs right now are so very high, can you give me some background as to why construction is getting so expensive? Can you explain that a little bit?
Part of that just within the marketplace and not just for this type of building is that the number of contractors and subcontractors in the Front Range from New Mexico up through Wyoming shrank so much in the last recession that it has not rebounded in terms of the number of people and firms available to work on projects. And projects have come roaring back so very quickly that we're getting much less competitive and in some cases, in some disciplines, no bids, you just can't find anybody to do the drywall work or something like this. A project like this that is more specialized, where the drywaller can't just come in and blow and go, is sometimes even less competitive because it requires that you find a pool of people who are interested in doing work that's a little more difficult and at a higher level in order to be able to do that. So you're not likely to be reaching out to, you're going to look at the cream of the crop in terms of the subcontractors in almost every circumstance. Same thing would be true in terms of mechanical contractors. The ones who want to do acoustically sensitive spaces are going to be fewer and farther between.
Yep, okay.
The space considerations that you raised are all worth looking at.
Okay.
Are all worth looking at. One of the things that we have tried hard to do in terms of the allocation of space is to make sure that there is enough room available in the support spaces and in the instructional areas for theater and music that they don't fall into the temptation and the trap of using the stage of the main theater as a classroom.
Right, right.
Because the moment we do that, we've locked up hours during the week that can't be used for performances. And so the ability to then partner with groups from the community and to make sure that the performance space is used for its highest and best use. So that's, if that means that we've gone overboard in terms of things like instrument storage and some support spaces that otherwise people would say, oh, we can just leave that stuff on the stage.
Right, and
because
we don't want that.
We really don't want to be
Yeah,
able to do
and
that.
I agree with all of that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree with all of that.
I certainly think that the lobby can be a space that we take a look at. The dressing rooms, I think the fundamental question that is worth discussion is about delivering instruction within those spaces. Commonly for higher education clients, those spaces are used to teach makeup classes and those kinds of things. So it's not just the size for a typical cast of a play or something like that, but it's how many people would we enroll and teach in a single section of makeup class, and how many stations do we need to do that?
Okay, but it's possible that we should say, take a little bit out there, take a little bit out in the lobby. Music instrument storage, all I could think of was, what's that, 2 or 3 pianos and...
Typically, what we need to be able to put away are large instruments like percussion instruments, pianos, those kinds of things.
Percussion.
Because if we don't put them away, we run the risk of them being damaged, and we don't want that to happen.
Probably harp, they're pretty large.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, but I'm more tempted to look at what can we make a little smaller than I am to say, let's change the wood on the acoustics.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
I mean, that's, okay, so I just wanted to see get your thoughts on that. And I understand what you're saying about trying to find a contractor who has the expertise that we would want for this kind of a building. I understand that as well. The 400-seat theater is what we've decided on over and over and over again in every meeting. So, I mean, that we haven't wavered from that at all. We need the practice rooms. Okay, all right. I've just seen this today, so I'm going to give it some thought. But I wanted to get your thoughts about that. So thank you.
My hope would be that working in collaboration with college staff and with the task force, that we could identify a target in terms of cost to work toward. That you all believe is palatable and feasible, and come up with some alternatives to say, what does it take to get there?
Right. I agree with you. Go backwards.
Mhm.
Go backwards that way.
Mhm.
Which is, you're right, a discussion for the entire group, along with the foundation and along with, of course, Dr. Schaefer.
Sure.
So, okay.
Thank you. Trustee Merrill,
Chair Mosier, I looked back at the library numbers about how often this space will be used. It will be used a lot, it looks like. My question is, how many students will we have to use this space, and how often will the community come here to use this space? And I don't know that. So does someone have an answer for that?
Dr. Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for pointing that my way, Madam Trustee Merrill. What I can tell you at this point, that probably the greatest unknown in terms of space utilization will indeed be the theater. What we've done as part of the exploration, though, is tried to identify venues that simply don't exist within our community and certainly don't exist within the campus. And that's how this 400-seat theater keeps coming up. You know, in the events where the Civic Center is too large, but St. Mark's is too small. The Black Box Theater doesn't work for that. And even with the utilization of the high school theaters, which we're finding are getting more and more booked, that's a piece we feel a pinch. But in terms of actually knowing utilization on a daily basis, on a weekend basis, on an evening basis, I think that's the hardest one for us to predict at this point. What I can tell you, though, having sat through numerous different ceremonies and other things here as we get towards the end of the spring semester, we're struggling to find a place to hold large pinning ceremonies, induction ceremonies, those types of things. And so, you know, to keep your mind sort of broad and thinking that performance is one piece of this, but there is a whole other slate of activities that this college handles on an annual basis that would probably rely on this space. So I think that's the most unknown. For the visual arts, you know, that's an area that's actually been growing in majors, has always had a very, very strong community enrollment component with it. My guess is we'll continue to be full in the utilization of those spaces and probably fill up whatever additional capacity that we add as we move through here. And then music is one of those areas where we've been looking at and examining the music programs. The interest in that type of education, both from a life enrichment as well as from a degree program, is something that there continues to be strong interest. We haven't reconciled the issue between current numbers. Are they a result of the fact that our facilities do need dire upgrades, or is it something else? And so I would imagine that our music spaces would be utilized even at a higher level than what the current spaces are utilized now. But I share Trustee Little's interest and concern, taking a look at this and seeing what we can do to squeeze, to shave, to make sure that it really is a viable size and a viable space, both in terms of what we need, but ultimately also what we can garner community support for. And maybe you may have a follow-up, Trustee Merrill, but one of the things I'll just put in your mind, because I've been grappling with this today, and I've shared some comments with the chairman as well as Trustee Little. One of the things we have to reconcile ourselves of, and I've had to reconcile myself of it, if arts education is going to continue to be a component of what we do at LCCC, I don't believe we have any other choice but to look for different space. We cannot continue to do that in the space that we're currently asking students to be in. And so whether it's the cost of renovating the existing space, which will always come with its shortcomings to do just the arts-based education that we have now, or a facility like this. I mean, it's to me a decision of, do we continue to support arts-based education at LCCC? I would highly recommend that we do. And if we're going to do that, we have to do something with this space. And so we're committed, and I'm committed to finding a way to get this done. I just want to make sure that we're out there with something we can ultimately get the community to support as well. And so taking a look at utilization, sizes, how we specifically program the dressing room and all those things, and saying what is critical to continue the programming that we have. And then let's really debate and dig into what are the nice things we would like to have as part of it. And I do think there's some solutions here. So.
I agree with Dr. Schaefer and with Brenda. I very much agree. I want this space. I just want to make sure that we utilize it and that it costs what we can afford. Thank you.
Trustee Dubois.
I realize that this is just premature, and I don't mean to be mundane, but I presume there will be an area within the lobby area for coat rooms and bathrooms.
One of the
because
reasons,
they're very important.
one of the reasons that allocation is as large as it is order to accommodate those things.
Oh,
My
that helps,
colleague was
Chris.
saying make it smaller, but I don't see how you can if you're having restrooms
Yeah,
and you've got to have those things.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I didn't even think that coat rooms and restrooms would be in here. I didn't even think.
The other thing I just wanted, this is just not a question or anything, but the other night, Joe, you were talking about, Dr. Schaefer, excuse me, you were talking about the utilizing space. Well, the band concert was at the Civic Center, and it was a wonderful concert, but in a 1,500 auditorium when there's only 100 people, it was awful. I mean, awful from a standpoint of appearance or whatever you want to say.
Sure.
It just was very, very sad. And the concert was outstanding. I understand they had a much bigger crowd for the chorus at St. Mary's.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, Trustee Du Bois, I mean, just think of the events we have been hosting around the community, which is wonderful. It's great that LCCC gets out in the community. But think of the speaker series, the different series. We've been at East High now. We've been down at the library. In those spaces and where we need room, we're becoming timid that when we fill up the UP room here, we're actually frustrating community members because that space is simply not designed or large enough to handle the functions. And so it's much more than the theater productions, than the musical ensembles. There's just so many things in that, and this type of venue, and that's just us. I can't even begin to think of who from the community would want to use this space as well. And so, while I don't have the metrics and the elements to say this is how frequently it would be utilized, this seems to hit the sweet spot in what's really needed in Cheyenne.
Trustee Erickson.
I have a few comments. And I'm somewhat reluctant to move forward with my comment about the theater, but I want to say something ahead of time. There's no doubt that our facility is totally inadequate for the performing arts. It is not instructional capable. I mean, the walls, you got rooms that are on top of each other, and we need a performing arts center, no doubt about it. I remember when bear with me a little bit, when I was mayor and I had the opportunity to build the Civic Center. And the Civic Center came in, we were hoping to have a 2,500 seat facility. And the architects told us, oh, we can do that. Sure. Well, it came in way over budget, and we had to really cut back. And there were two places to cut back. One was the seating, and the other was the size of the stage. Fortunately, I had a theater manager who said, don't touch the stage. You got to have an adequate size stage in order to provide for all the different types of venues that are going to be on that stage, from theater to music to choral to ensembles to the symphony and the like. So we backed off. We didn't do anything with the stage. So we backed down, and instead of 2,500 seats, we got 1,500 seats. A lot of folks said, well, why did you do that? Well, we couldn't build it at 2,500. So my comment here is I look at the theater, and the theater has, for the stage and the seat, seating of 400, which is quite right. But it looks kind of tight if you're going to have an adequate stage that is going to be used for all of the different venues that are going to be utilizing that facility. It just seems to me that 6,500 square feet for both the stage and the theater is a bit tight. Can you speak to that?
Certainly, and your comments are very welcome, and I'm glad to have somebody who's been through this kind of process before involved. That gives us a stage of about 45 by 60 feet. So it's a very significant size relative to a 400 seating capacity. And so I'm very confident that that's something that could accommodate the range of ensembles, both musically and theatrically that you'd be looking at. And certainly within our thought process, we're also anticipating some things that give you flexibility, like a 4-stage extension that would allow you to close the curtain and do a presentation in front of the curtain while there's still, scenery under construction behind you, or those kinds of things. But I think that's actually a slightly larger stage than a couple of recent projects that we've developed and been part of that have been able still to do a wide range of programming. So I'm confident that that's a good allocation. I wouldn't necessarily make it a target for cutting space.
Thank you.
So you said 40, excuse me.
Go ahead.
You said 45 by 60?
About 42, 43 by 60. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, may I add a couple of comments to what President Schaefer said? There is considerable text in here from the task force that is new compared to 2005 and 2006 when we studied this last. And one of the layers that is very informative to this process has been the educational articulation of your students being able to enroll then at 4-year institutions after having studied at LCCC. And quite honestly, I don't think I can say enough how much of a discovery it was to me of the number of institutions, including the University of Wyoming, that has simply said, we won't enroll your students in certain areas like visual arts and that sort of thing unless they've had different kinds of experiences at the associate's degree level. That's one of the reasons that fabrication shop is in there. That's one of the reasons that the 400-seat theater is in there, is because those higher education colleagues are saying to your faculty and staff, we don't feel that we can accept your students based on the experiences they've had because your facilities are so limited. And I think that's a very powerful reason for look. It's not just for everybody to feel better about themselves or to provide new toys to play with. It's very realistically a key component to LCCC's ability to fulfill its educational mission in these areas.
I appreciate those comments, and I think back with the master plan that the folks were very concerned at that point that we talk about this from an educational perspective. And everything you've said tonight and others have focused on is in fact focused on serving students, not having some Taj Mahal building out there, but rather a building which functions as an educational programming facility. And I think that's what we're looking for, and I look forward to seeing that. Any other questions or comments? Anything from the public? Leah?
Yes.
Would you like to go ahead and stand?
Don't use his microphone.
Absolutely.
My question was, where would the sets be built? Is that the fabrication area?
Fabrication area, yes.
I know UW has had at least a lovely pit where the
Mainframe.
where they drop the flats down into it, and then you slowly bring those 10, 15 foot tall flats up and you paint as they go, so you don't have students up on ladders.
That's certainly something that could be incorporated within the fabrication area. I think that Jason, has had so little ability to really build an instructional program in scenic design, scene painting, lighting, those kinds of things, that would be well worth a conversation as to instructionally, how far along would the program need to be before that type of scene painting was taught. But it wouldn't be a massive increase in square footage. So it's certainly something that could get looked at.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Dr.
just
Schaefer.
a couple of closing remarks to bring the presentations together. Certainly, Chris, thank you for bringing this forward. It would be my recommendation that we do pull back with the steering committee and other interested folks on campus and go back through this and take a hard look at it and really start to see where we can shave this in. As I've shared with some of you, certainly the $25 million mark, I think was higher than what we were hoping to land at. I have no scientific research to say that it's too much or too little in terms of what we could actually secure for this project. But your gut reaction is, okay, that may be more than we can feasibly sell. And so I would like to do all we can at this stage to kind of really get in and say truly what's most pragmatic, what's most critical. Let's tighten where we can so that we can advance in the process. And so that would be my recommendation. I just throw that out there knowing that what you may see then on the 27th will possibly look a little different. The numbers will be different than what this is, although I think from a conceptual standpoint and certainly from the prospectus, the study that folks did, hopefully everything all the needs ring true with the changes, but it likely will change some from where we're at. But I do think we need to go back and take a look at this and really see what we can do to tighten it up before we come forward and ask you to approve it. So hopefully you're good with that. And then the other piece, just as a reminder, and it harkens back to Trustee Erickson's question earlier about how do you pay for these things? I know at times, especially with a conservative environment like we live in here at the college, it seems almost presumptuous to be talking about projects and $1 million price tags and those types of things, this early in the process. But unfortunately, that's really the way it works here is you have to start talking about conceptual design. I mean, level one is a reconnaissance. It's to go out and figure out, okay, what is it that you can, looking at? What are the needs you're trying to address? And then you have to make this big leap from a conceptual need and an idea into, okay, what's it going to cost? And that's a big jump in level one. And so we'll see fluctuation from level one and level two, but we have to have that initial plan and those initial dollar figures to start the request for funding process. And the typical process within the state is you start a level one, you advance it through the Community College Commission and the state, typically asking for half of the funding from the state, half that have to come from local funds, either general obligation bonds, private gifts, those types of things. And so it seems, I know some of you might say, well, how are we going to pay for this and where's the money? We have to have this first to be able to go forward and start asking for those dollars. And so we need to get this into the pipeline to start moving down that process. But the more work we do up front, the better our communication is going to be, and hopefully the higher rate of success we'll have as we actually move these projects to fruition. And this is one I really want to move all the way through. Let's test it. Let's put it out there. Let's get the support we think we can get, but let's actually run it to the end this time and let's move forward with it. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging me.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple more questions for Chris. Chris, this my request or question here comes from the fact that, like Bill said, mentioning coat rooms and restrooms in the lobby, and I didn't realize they were a part of that. Is it possible to have some kind of a drawing that has what would be in these rooms? I don't want too much detail because too much detail is going to lock us in too much.
Sure.
But just a coat room, restroom, this a little square written in there somewhere. I think you mentioned something about music storage, maybe what the square foot of a piano is. I don't know, just so that there's a really good understanding that it's more than just this space for a
Sure.
lobby. And it's more than just this space for a dressing room.
Certainly.
Is
we
that
can.
possible?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? We appreciate your presentation, Chris. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
And again, I would emphasize, appreciate the work that folks have done on these different projects, this level one. And Dr. Schaefer, tell me where we're at relative to these three projects and proceeding with the commission. I have a memory of what we've done and not done, but I'd like clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to do that. That's the process that we're starting here. It's just a lot of work, and then there's the push and then wait, and then a lot of work, and then wait. So after you act on the level ones on May 27th, then we have to turn around, and I believe by the beginning of June, have to submit them into the Wyoming Community College Commission's capital construction database, essentially. So we input different elements of these projects into that system. And then in June, I think the end of June, the commission will meet, and part of that meeting will be to actually identify and look at the ranked project requests from the 7 community colleges based on that model. So again, that model has 13 capital measures that looks at a variety of things from enrollments, community size, programming, space utilization, all that great stuff. It'll actually then turn out a prioritized ranking of community college projects. The commission then at that point has to consider those and then advance them to A&I's construction management division. The last couple of years, they haven't actually restricted or did anything else. They just essentially advanced the prioritized ranking of the projects. Now they have it within their purview, I would assume, to actually say we're only going to advance these, or we're not going to, or we're going to advance them all. Past practice suggested they advance them all. They go to A&I construction management then by July, in which they look at it and they work on them and actually then advance them to the State Building Commission in October. And then the State Building Commission will have to consider all the projects and say yay or nay to them, and then advance them to the governor's office. The governor folds those into his biennial budget recommendation, usually the end of October, early November, to the legislature. It goes to the Joint Appropriations Committee, part of the budget process, in the Legislative Committee. So some big things for us will be, where do these projects come out in the ranking in the Wyoming Community College capital construction process? And then also, depending on what ANICM construction management does with them in terms of how they're advanced to the State Building Commission. And so I don't have a crystal ball knowing where our projects have ranked in the past comparatively and what's been happening in capital construction. I would imagine that the two we'd be requesting state funds for, the library and the Fine and Performing Arts building, should fare well. But whether that's top 3 or top 5 or top 7, I'm not sure. But that's essentially the process we'll go through between now and the legislative session.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about that. Would it be a good idea for those of us trustees on the board who really would like to see this project be completed to attend that community college, the Wyoming Community College Commission meeting that day, or are comments not taken that day?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Little, they would be taken, and I would say let me advise you on that, depending on how those projects actually come out ranked, and the indication we get from the commission and what they may do in terms of considering them. It's always beneficial to have you in the audience. Always. I would never discourage you. In fact, I would always encourage you, if you can, to attend and do that. But I think really, if I was going to use my powder for an analogy, I would be looking at the State Building Commission and working with construction management and our local legislative delegation, specifically those on the Joint Appropriations Committee.
Like Senator Ross.
Like Senator Ross, Representative Nicholas, and others on there, because I think that's really where, and the governor's office, of course, that's where I would spend a lot of my effort. But I will keep you apprised to see how the commission plays out. And certainly if you can make that meeting in June. Carol, do you know where that meeting's going to be in June?
No.
Is that Sheridan? It's Riverton.
No, we just had it in Riverton. It's going to be Sheridan.
Sheridan, I think.
Yeah,
Sheridan. June.
So it may work out. But certainly when we get to the State Building Commission, which I believe will be in October here in Cheyenne, that will be a critical one.
And those are the elected officials, aren't they?
That is correct. With I believe 2 legislative liaisons, one from the House and one from the Senate. And I'm not sure who that was. That was Representative Dan Zwanitzer and I think Senator Phil Nicholas the last round. I'm not sure who it is now.
So would it behoove us to have personal conversations with the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Public Instruction perhaps, or Superintendent of Public Instruction?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Little, especially when the rankings come out of the Community College Commission and are advanced, by all means, I think words of encouragement and contact with all of them, including our legislative delegation, will be critical in getting these projects.
If I remember correctly, the Secretary of State used to be on our foundation board.
Trustee Little, you recall quite well.
Don't bring it up.
Mr. Chairman, I know you're pretty well completed with these three, but I wonder if I could piggyback on your request for an update on those three as to reminding us where we are with the physical education renovations.
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Erickson, thank you for bringing that up. And I don't want to put him on the spot, but since we have a distinguished guest here in the audience who will be joining the LCCC staff, one of the things I've shared before is the renovation of the physical education facility is going to be contingent on some real strong leadership and vision coming from athletics and campus recreation. And it just so happens that we have a new director of athletics and campus recreation who joined us, Scott Noble, who will be transitioning from a bison to a golden eagle. And we're delighted to have him here, but he and I and Vice President Hay and a few others will be sitting down and charting out our vision of where we want to go with that. We have some money to raise and a few creative things to do, but we're committed to getting that project done. And I know you have a deep and sincere interest in getting that project done.
I recall, didn't the legislature authorize us moving forward on this?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Erickson, they did. We have essentially until next summer to initiate the project. And so the next phase with this would be advanced, and Tim, jump in here if I'm getting off base, would essentially be advanced planning. So our equivalent of a level 2 plan for that renovation that would essentially then lead us into level 3 schematic design and getting that out. We have to initiate that within a year. So we've got some work to do on making sure we've got funds sort of secured up or have a pretty good idea. We initiate that process and hopefully by then we'll have 2 new buildings occupied on campus and then we can be looking at these other projects so Tim doesn't run away from the campus.
One last thing, I'm not sure that everyone around the table here recognizes who Scott Noble is.
Yeah, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but Scott,
say hello to him.
You want to stand up and just say a few words or say?
Thank you. I am so excited to soar with the Eagles. Yeah, I really am. Thank you, and I will be here at every meeting. So
Great.
Thank you.
And he came from?
South High.
South High.
Go Bisons.
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Loomis.
The Arts Committee would be very wise to keep Don Erickson in their pocket. I went through that Civic Center thing with him, and I'm convinced it would not be standing there today without him.
Good, thanks, Chris.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate the work.
I was there, Don, I was paying attention.
With some, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to correct, the October meeting is the 30th, and it's at Eastern. It's on our schedule.
Oh.
The October 30th meeting.
Yes.
Oh, not the commission meeting. Or is that the State Building Commission meeting?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep.
That's not on here.
The June Wyoming Community College Commission meeting, though, is that in Sheridan? Does it show it on there?
I think 26th.
It's the 26th, and it's at Sheridan.
Okay.
26th, Sheridan.
Yes. Great. With that, I'm excited to have Dr. Schaefer talk about the next item, the Wyoming Center for Business and Economic Analysis. And I would just simply, to give a little bit of maybe background or history, if Dr. Schaefer doesn't mind, this project or the Center for Business and Economic Analysis came into being back in the early 80s. And I had the privilege at the time of teaching with Dick O'Gara, who was our economics instructor at the time. And that was the beginning of the development for the center. It was a request that was made to him to develop a plan because the rail garrison was under discussion at that time, and we had very little information relative to economic impact statements that were required. And so he was asked to bring forth a plan to develop some of that data, and he did. It was accepted, and here on campus, and very well respected, because from the education community, you were getting economic data. So you were getting it from, so to speak, a non-biased source. And Dick was involved with that over many years in relation to the college, and the college was recognized as being a provider of that information. And then there was a time came along when that site moved off campus. Dick created a company that maintained providing that data and expanded it, and worked with the Joint Powers Board. And it has been in the community serving the Joint Powers Board, leads other economic development entities and businesses who are seeking to be involved in Laramie County, and even beyond that. So having said that, it's kind of a privilege that I think we have the opportunity to see the possibility of working with that group and it coming from our campus again. Dr. Schaefer.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I should probably just let you present the item. You probably do it much better than I would, to be honest with you, because I don't have that history with the center. But in a nutshell, this was just a heads up and an opportunity just to bring the board up to speed on the conversation we're having. As the chairman sort of alluded to, Dick O'Gara, who has been running the center, started within the college and then in the community for many, many years, has expressed an interest in phasing into retirement. I don't know if you jump into retirement, phase into retirement, or fall into it. I'm not quite sure. I'd like to fall into it someday. Not too soon, Trustee Merrill. So really, faculty within the business program area have been having conversations with Dick, and we've looped Ed in, as well as Dr. Fierro and Dr. Hawkins to take a look at the feasibility of transitioning this center to the college. It sounds easy conceptually, and I think from a programmatic standpoint, will be a relatively easy transition. We hope to move it in and over a 3-year period, get the assistance from Dick to essentially reestablish the center here, have a faculty position that'll essentially be released for a significant portion of his or her time to learn to run the center, and really take on some of the responsibilities of the center, specifically publishing the economic indicators report for the Joint Economic Development Powers Board, as well as a commercial database that we provide for economic development activities, and transition that into the college. And I think that's really the first phase, is just get what's happening out there now as part of the college, but the opportunities for student involvement in really real world practical type of activities centered around economic forecasting, economic modeling is pretty exciting. So conceptually, it's sort of easy. I see Tara over there saying, yeah, but legally there's some things we've got to work through. And that's really what we're doing right now. We have to ensure that the Joint Powers Board would be willing to continue to support those activities when the center resides within the college. So we've started conversations with them, and then we have to figure out just the details of how you transition from an entity recognized within the state by the Secretary of State outside of the college to one that's inside of the college, what rights, property, so on and so forth, risk. All of those things have to be transitioned and assumed. So conceptually, I think we're excited about it. I think we can do it, but just wanted to let you know that we've still got some work to do and figure out how we functionally move it forward. But since we've had that conversation with the Joint Powers Board, just wanted to bring you up to speed that these conversations and this transition is at least, we're working on it and hope that it happens.
I can appreciate that Dr. Schaefer might be looking towards retirement, not anytime soon, but hey, under great duress. I used to be an early campus person here at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. That was my nature, to want to be here that early. But Joe said, hey, we got to be at the Joint Powers. I'm sure, no problem. I'll be there at the Joint Powers Board meeting with you and talk to him. And he said, that's at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I'm beginning to rethink these early morning meetings very strongly, but Dr. Schaefer was there and did a wonderful job of presenting to the Joint Powers Board, and I'm really looking forward to progress on that. Any
Mr. Chair,
questions?
just a quick comment. I am so pleased with how Dr. Schaefer and the faculty and the staff here give us a heads up on what's going on. And this is a very good indication of a heads up of the interaction of a potential that's coming back to the college. And it's really good to hear. And I really encourage and reinforce you to continue to give us heads up on things like this.
You would be surprised, but it's now time to hear the president's. So the heads up you were looking for, Trustee Erickson, is now underway again.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I appreciate it. I know that it's getting later and warmer in this room at the same time, I think. And so I'll try to be brief. There are quite a few things I just want to touch on briefly with you. First, a strong contingent of faculty, staff, and administrators attended the American Association of Community Colleges annual convention in San Antonio earlier, mid-April. It's a great opportunity. It's one of those areas where you've heard me reference it. I like to take folks on campus that are new or really showing a deep interest in where community colleges are going in terms of an industry, if I call them an industry, and I call it getting them to drink the community college Kool-Aid. But there's nothing that you can provide that gives the same experience than taking a new leader rising up through the ranks or a faculty member, somebody to a center where you literally have tens of thousands of people who are basically in the same work that you are, struggling with the same things, and giving them the opportunity to learn and interact. It's just a powerful, powerful environment. And so it's something we commit to for professional development, for team building, and this year was no different. The one thing I do want to touch on, the focus and the if you will, the theme of the conference was called The Next Big Things. And it's really following in line of this reinventing the community college, focus on student success, on completion. How are we going to do that? What has been proven in terms of being the next big things? And session after session that we sat in was just more and more firm validation of the work that we're doing here. And I know that it may be painful, and I know that folks say, oh, that wasn't implemented the way it needed to be the first time. I know we're still struggling through it, but to sit in and hear from campuses at much larger, much more complex organizations who maybe have a year or two ahead of us, but are essentially marching down the same path that we are, is just affirming that we really are on the right phase. What's more exciting is when they actually start showing what the results are, and knowing that we're just at the cusp of seeing some of those results. I can't tell you how many times we'd rally up after the conferences and I'd have somebody say, Sarah Hannes would say, you know what we're doing with orientation and recruiting in the communities. I just heard about this. Jeff Schmidt will come and say, this cohort thing we're doing with the business program. I just heard about how this was happening here, and that energy is just. It's priceless. And so this is something that we'll continue to take a team to and really benefit from, and hopefully have more of our folks presenting at it in the future. So just quick update. While we were there, we did have a chance to sit down with the folks from Economic EMSI, Economic Modeling Specialists Incorporated. Essentially, it's a group we've worked with in the past that have done economic impact studies for the community colleges in the state. The last one we did, I think, was in 2010. We're working with them on a proposal to essentially update the economic impact analysis for the community colleges. And what they'll be proposing is essentially doing a district level economic impact, a service area level, and then a statewide aggregate level. So we'll get updated numbers to say what's the return on investment for the state's investment in LCCC. And so that proposal is coming, and I'll keep you abreast as it develops and if we decide to move forward with it, because there's some powerful data that come from that. Cabinet search updates. Thank you, Trustee Erickson. He's been at a couple of the open forums for our Vice President of Administration and Finance. We have 2 more finalists coming to campus next Monday, and then I think next Thursday, I believe. that will be here. 4 very good finalist candidates. Very pleased with how that process is shaping up. We are just about into the screening process for the executive director of human resources as well. That's going along quite well. And I think, as I informed you, we have some contract help from Mountain States Employers Council, just helping us keep the HR things managing. And there's a lot going on there, but I think we're handling it okay. I was asked and want to update you, for those of you, and Brenda, hopefully I'm not stealing this from you because I know we talked about it at the Academic and Student Affairs Council, but our Dean of Arts and Humanities should be here within, I think, June coming. We did hire and are excited to have Dr. Daniel Powell coming to us. Dr. Powell Daniel is really, you'll enjoy him, an exceptional candidate, advanced music and arts-based degrees, but he also has an MBA, and he's most recently from Florida. Really, really unique mixture of business and finance sense with a passion for the arts, gregarious, easygoing, very engaging. Really looking forward to introducing you to him in person. And so wanted to share that with you. And we already introduced Scott, so thank you again. We're looking forward to having him on board. One other thing, I know you have this Wyoming Business Council grant application. I'm just going to table that for this time, and should bring you additional information. But I do want to just talk about an event we had on campus yesterday. This was our first high school orientation registration day. Sarah Hannes, our director of admissions, put it together with partnership with lots of different folks on campus. And we had 160, is that, do I have that right? 160 high school students, counselors, and parents on campus yesterday, going through a comprehensive orientation and registration process. I think we registered almost 100 of them in one shot. And one of the most engaging, comprehensive activities to bring local high school, not just local, I mean, they came from over the hill in Laramie, they came from other districts from the Eastern Laramie County, as well as the local schools. And it was really a neat event. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but the coordination and the things that they did to bring those high school students here in terms of really engaging in recruitment was exceptional. And so I just wanted to share that as one of the highlights of what we're doing. And then the last thing, Mr. Chairman, and are you ready to be done? I think, Keenan, this is your last meeting with us, isn't it? Yeah. So our first ever student ex officio will be graduating next Saturday, walking across the stage before he heads southeast, right? Am I getting that right?
I think so. Virginia, heading off to Virginia.
Oh,
so.
okay. South.
Yeah.
Well, northeast, close enough. I'm sure it's along the Continental Divide. So I just wanted to give the opportunity for you, if you're interested, but certainly for me, to say thank you for being the inaugural student that sits in that chair, for your representation and participation in the long hours of the night. And we wish you the best of luck after graduation with soccer, with studies, with your family and everything. But thank you for what you've done for us here, Keenan. Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
As chair, again, I would like to say, Keenan, thank you very much. I'm sure the rest of the trustees have appreciated your being here and working with us on issues affecting students. So thank you, and best of luck in your future.
Thanks.
Board reports, and I'd like to start off with involving Don just briefly here, and Joe might have a comment or two, but we were able to attend Smart Growth America. I don't want to dwell on this long, but I would say that I felt extremely beneficial to be there. There were numerous other leaders in the community who attended, including the current mayor and the past, I won't say old, past mayor who was there, along with county commissioners, planners, a number of different folks. And we got to hear some things that were not only relative as far as facilities for folks to live, but it also sparked some ideas back to thinking about the kinds of facilities we wanted for those folks and what Xers and millennials and others wish to live, how they wish to live. And they came up with something I just suggest that all of you might plug into your computer and try. I know a son of mine who lives in Denver and just recently moved. When I mentioned it to him, he said, "Oh yeah, very much so." And he picked up a place where he can ride from Littleton clear to downtown Denver without getting on any streets or anything, but it's a walk
Index.
index. And I think it's just walk.org or walkability.org, I think is what it is. And it really gives you a rating for the cities and the areas that you're looking for. And it's quite fascinating relative to what this city needs. The other thing was, again, Don and Dr. Schaefer can fill in, but I was fascinated with their projections about the type of housing that we currently have, what's being built and what's projected to be needed, and how that, relating it to Cheyenne. I found that very interesting, along with our role relative to that. So I'll shut up and
Well, you pretty well covered, but I have a couple to add to that. The walk index, it's very easy. You just get on the internet, walk index, and then plug in your address, and it's going to tell you what your score is. Cheyenne overall is 39. My neighborhood is 44. And I thought it'd be a lot more than that because we've got a flat neighborhood and close to everything and so forth and so on. But the closer you are to 100, the better it is for that walk index. And the point that we're trying to make is that we're getting too fat, that we're not walking, we're not doing enough. We're just getting into a car and going down a block. And let's start walking a little bit more. Another thing that I remember from that meeting was how many folks commute into Cheyenne from outside of Laramie County. Now, that's not saying where, but they're from outside Laramie County coming into Laramie County. 22%. Now, 1 in 5, in other words, 1 in 5 workers here. No, outside the county. Yeah, outside of the county, which I thought, I remember we've done in the past, we've done grocery cart analysis, where do people buy their groceries, where they buy their goods and so forth, but I've never seen it this high, 22%. And I think the implication was that a lot of young people commute to come here to work. And what we're doing is we're losing all that revenue that they're generating. Okay, we're losing that expertise in our community as well outside of their working, wherever they're working. And a lot of those people are working in professional jobs, no doubt about it. So it was a very good discussion. And it reminded me of something that I'd like to suggest that we, as a board, look at the West Edge project. There's a project that the city is doing, some of you may be familiar with it, of redeveloping the west side of Cheyenne between Lincoln Way and 24th Street, that area over to Crow Creek and from City Hall. And if any of you remember, the City Hall on the mayor's office has a huge, huge window. This huge, huge window was put in there purposely by me so that every mayor in the future could look at the west side and let's develop it. So it's happening. Sometimes it takes a while, but it's happening. 25 years later, it's happening. So it was an interesting place. I was glad that 3 of us, you and Dr. Joe and I, were there representing LCCC.
Thank you. Dr. Schaefer?
Mr. Chairman, I think you and Trustee Erickson covered it. It was a good conversation and it reminded us how central of a role we play in the community and the things we can do to help the community continue to develop. And there's some work to do, but there's also some good things. I think my favorite statement of that entire meeting was the mayor saying he wanted a headline that says, "We don't stink."
Yeah, we don't stink.
And we forget to blow toot our own horn sometimes and talk about the great things that we have here, but there's still work to do.
Next item I'd like to do, and I think we've shared, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on, but with regards to WAC, the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees, you all received information. We just recently, really today, finalized the hiring of Aaron Taylor as the executive director to assist us in communications with the community at large throughout the state, with our legislators, with the commission and commissioners. And I hope all of you will take an opportunity to visit with Erin. She is here in Cheyenne, from Cheyenne. She most recently had worked with Wyoming Taxpayers Association, which is a challenging group to all keep focused on. And in addition, she does work with the Union Pacific is the other one, but she's primary with the Trustees Association. So I hope you will take an opportunity to visit with Erin when you get the chance. I think you'll find her very, very exciting to work with in terms of helping us move forward.
Chair, Mr. Chair,
Yes,
what does that mean? She will work primarily with us or the commission?
right. It's the executive director for WAC is not a full-time job.
Oh, it still will not be a full-time job?
Right, right.
Okay, thank you.
But her primary work is with us.
Thank you.
Any comments on her? Okay. I wanted to ask, you've all received information about trustee involvement in the selection of the new University of Wyoming president. And I would hope that maybe we can talk a little bit. It has to happen pretty quickly. When I say we, I'm saying maybe talk with each other. You get a chance, chat a little bit, and maybe you've got some suggestions or comments you want to make on that site that's available, because I think this is an opportunity for trustees to have some involvement in that process. And I would hope that we do involve ourselves in some fashion on that. That is it in terms of board reports, unless someone else has. Trustee.
Mr. Chairman, the academic affairs, the academic and student affairs committee, academic affairs and student services committee met on April 22nd, and I would like to give a report on that, if I may.
You bet. I'm sorry I skipped you. So to speak.
We met on April 22nd, and I had asked Judy Hay to please give us an update on advising it here at the college, because when we were going through vice president for student services interviews, and Judy was a candidate, one huge category of questions had to do with advising and the future of advising here at the college, and that we wanted some changes to take place. So I asked Judy to please update us about that. She had Karen Flewelling, did I pronounce that correctly? Catherine. Sorry, Catherine Flewelling there in her place to give us an update on advising, and I'd like to share a few things about that, if I may. Right now, every student at LCCC is assigned an advisor, and goals with that student are set, and an educational plan is set with each student through their advisor. They are all professional advisors, not faculty members. There are 7 advisors here on the college. Advising is based on the number of hours the student has taken. So different levels of advising are put into place based on how long the student has been here, basically, and how many classes. So a very beginning student would get a different level of advising than a second-year student. Each of the advisors have about 300 students each. They communicate deadlines and dates with their advisee. There's a goal of meeting with faculty members. They do that as well. The advisor helps their advisee through the financial aid process and work as a liaison with the financial aid process and helps guide them through. Our advisors now at LCCC are required to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree, but we have advisors with master's degrees and have master's degrees in counseling. They have expertise in case management. Eventually, the students will be assigned to kind of a program advising model. Catherine said that they are now seeing great results in advising. Students are seeing their advisors and making relationships. I asked for some data from her, and she said that it's too early for that because this new process just started, but she would have data for us in 2 to 3 years. Advisors meet with faculty members and go over the programs that the faculty members run so that the advisors know exactly what's going on with the faculty. And students can switch an advisor if it's just not going well. We asked about that too, if there's like a personality problem. So anyway, I felt very good about some of the changes in advising and the direction that advising is going. I felt very good about that. We also talked about the Fine and Performing Arts building, and Jose reported on that for us, and it was very similar to what we just heard. And we basically heard from Jose that we were going to hear what we heard. So everything he said we were going to hear is what we heard. So that's good. We talked about Daniel Powell coming and that there would be a 2-week overlap between Daniel and Nicole Bryant. So so that they can learn from one another. We talked about the Fine and Performing Arts Committee making a trip to the Parker Complex in Parker, Colorado. So we talked a little bit more about that. And then just more discussion about that building, which is very similar to this discussion we already heard. I asked for some follow-up work on the curriculum that we approved at our last meeting. That curriculum was presented to the Wyoming Community College Commission. Those new programs, I should say, not curriculum, but new programs, were approved by the Wyoming Community College Commission, except for my favorite, architectural design, was not approved by the Community College Commission because they questioned an associate's degree in that program. So they're going to do a little bit of tweaking, some changes in that program, and then take it once again to the Wyoming Community College Commission. We are going to be hearing about some more programs at our next meeting in May, having to do with mechanics and auto body. And it's going to follow a very similar path, which is these are courses where we want to have more emphasis, not in just taking enough to get a raise or something in your job, but to actually have it be a course for which you earn some kind of certificate or degree. And so we're going to hear some similar things out of mechanics and auto body in May. So we had a very good meeting and felt good about things.
Appreciate that.
I would take any questions anybody might have.
I just need clarity to come back. The architect program, was that not discussed that day? Because I thought everything was approved.
No, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the architectural design program was actually pulled in the
Oh, was it pulled?
in the approval process, so it never actually made it there, but it was pulled based on feedback from the commission with concerns about the program. So they're still working on it.
Still working on, which is good, because in my next life I'm going to take that class.
I found it quite interesting at the commission meeting last time. I don't want to dig deeply into this, but I look forward to the next ones that we present. I would like to have a discussion with Dr. Schaefer or Dr. Fierro regarding that process and see if there's anything we as trustees might need to do to make that smoother.
I would welcome that conversation.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it's not rather making it smoother. It is to reinforce what we've already vetted and presented to the commission. And just so that those of you who were in on this conversation, there was some concern with the commissioners, the community college commissioners, that we were presenting a slew of programs all of a sudden, and that they had not been vetted properly. Well, they went ahead of it through us. We had a very thorough review of it. The academic council of all the various academic VPs throughout the state, they all reviewed them, and it was all well done, but something happened. And thank goodness to our president, who very resiliently, I saw in your evaluation the word resilient come up a couple of times, but very resilient and also non-defensive and very positively indicated that we have really moved this thing forward, and to postpone to a next session would delay us in our capability to implement these programs. And I thought, I'm just amazed at how Dr. Joe manages to come from being pushed down and being non-defensive and being positive. And he did a super job. And anyway, it came through. And we got, but I thought too that the architectural one was approved, but thinking about it, it was not discussed.
Wasn't there. Construction management was the one.
Yeah.
But if I would simply say that it's one of the few times I think the commission, and I was kind of fascinated as to why, really, I don't know, I would almost say dug into this more than they normally do. It just didn't seem like their typical process, and to question that I know from the work that the Academic Affairs Committee did, and that was the point I made to them. You know, it was kind of like, well, we didn't just, yeah, I need to, let me just say that I emphasized very strongly to them that the trustees had done a very thorough job in looking at those programs, along with hearing, you know, the information from our folks here who did a very professional job of putting that together. So I was just a little surprised, and that's why I say it would be nice to find out a little bit more as to.
Mr. Chair, I do
What
have
might have been the issue.
one quick report, very quick. The Flex Tech building, the task force met here a little over a week ago. We reviewed the final contract design, and it's now out on the street. It's out for bid. So we're anticipating our bids to come in, I think, the 28th of the month, at least the end of the month.
27th through 28th, is that correct?
Toward the end. 28th.
Oh, great, wonderful, good news.
Well,
But we hope it's going to be good.
Hope it's
But
good.
we see what the dollars are.
Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yes.
I just want to say, you were talking about the courses being approved and all that. I can remember in two different lengthy phone conversations, people trying to get courses approved. And this was nothing new that they did, examining it every little detail. That's always been the case. And we had lengthy phone conversations. So I don't want you to think that was something new or a surprise.
Okay. Appreciate that. Okay, we have two policies. The first one is Board Committee Policy 1.2.6. This is a recommendation to the trustees to approve this policy. The chair would entertain a motion to so do.
I so move.
Second.
Question.
Question's been called for. All those in favor of Board Policy 1.2.6 revised.
I,
All opposed? Motion carries.
I move that the student account automatic payment plan, policy 4.11 be approved.
I'll second it.
Any question, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion to approve student account automatic payment plan policy 4.11, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There are no other approval items. Butch Keatle had some, yes.
Would you please let the board know that those items are now available?
Oh.
Thank you.
See, I knew you would have to remind me. And I have a note here, I'm not supposed to do this. I had asked, and other board members had made comment about it too, that we have policies and procedures available to us rather than having tons of them that have to be, updated whenever we make changes, that these are now available in the president's office. And we as trustees, these will be available at board meetings so we can look at them. And if we've got questions or we want to review, or we don't have to wait for a meeting, so we can come out here and take a look at these. And of course, they're also online, but this allows us, some of us like myself, kind of like to have a paper one to take a look at from time to time. So please, these in the future, we'll be setting around a couple of different areas so that you can access them. And appreciate very much your hard work in getting those together and having those available to us.
Actually, my Jennifer did that, so I will pass on your thanks to her.
Well, we as a board appreciate that. Thank you. Butch Keatle could not be with us this evening, but I wanted to just, in kind of closing up shop here, mention that I think Butch did a great job in working with him and Dr. Mom and Laramie previously, and I know you talked about that at the board meeting when I was gone, but I wanted to say that I thought those folks really did a fine job. And Keenan, again, we say thanks and wish you the best. New business.
If you got something to say, did you?
You bet.
We actually do have something today, so I'll make it quick though. We finished the SVAC funds, so you'll be getting that report here shortly with the reasons why we made cuts and things like that. We did get it under the budget, so it's always good. We also held elections. We'll have 4 returning members and then the rest all brand new senators. Bill actually brought our vice president candidate along with him. It's Sawyer Burkett. He'll be running for vice president, so you'll see him a lot next year.
Good luck.
Yeah.
And this is Bill's last meeting as well, so
That's right.
we'd appreciate him as well.
All right, good. Now, what about you? Where are you headed?
Southern Virginia University.
Oh, that's right.
We also have a few memos coming up along the way, up the ladder. Just different surveys that we've done we just finished one for students, what they would like to see with housing, things like that. So we'll go along with that, the building plans. I don't think we've pulled that all together. I think that we just turned that into the advisors, and so that should be coming up here soon. We also finished a memo that'll be coming up about the PE building. We did another survey there. We had 55 participants. It was just a paper survey. It wasn't online or anything. So we had a few participants, a lot voiced their opinions, and we even have pictures of some of the equipments, things that they would like to see. They put together a good little memo there, and then
We have an athletic director.
yes,
Care of those
so
problems.
we'll be able to help the athletic director there. And we also have one with the Sodexo as well, so you'll be able to see those coming up soon. Otherwise, that's it.
Very good.
Really appreciate that. And since the new athletic director in recreation is here, I look forward to seeing some plans for not only athletic, but for the campus recreation activities that will be taking place. And I think your surveys should really help us see what's going on there, what might be like. Trustee Erickson.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could ask you a question. You've served on this board as the student ex officio. What do you think? You think it's something that's worthwhile?
I think it's a neat experience, and I personally have learned a lot of how the school runs and how decisions are made, and so I think it was a good learning experience for me. And I think I think that a lot of the things discussed here, being able to have someone actually represent and bring that back to student government and to the students is a big help as well. So I think it's been good. I think it will get better once more students go through the process.
That's a
and
two-way street.
we get more
It's good for us
experience.
as well.
Yeah. So I appreciate it.
Does the student body elect a new you and elect a new representative?
On Thursday,
Okay.
during our meeting, there'll be a new ex officio. You'll be able to know who it is.
Appreciate Mr. Chairman. We'll hear from Bill because I know he's got a stellar commencement address getting drafted and ready to go at commencement activities. And so it'll be fun. It's getting there. It'll be fun to see him next Saturday. And Sawyer, it's going to be good to continue to work with you. Good students, good young gentlemen.
Bill, it's been a pleasure. Do you have any closing comments you would like to make?
Just thank you guys for all your help around the school this year. We really appreciate it. Everything you guys did with us and that President Schaefer's helped us out with. We appreciate it. One thing that I don't know if you touched up on, he brought up President Schaefer brought up student fee changes for the high-tech fee of that cafe. We have a memo coming toward to him here in the next few days as well. And just thank you for the opportunity to come to the meetings and enjoy them. I truly have learned a lot about the school and the inner workings of it. It's been fun.
Well, thanks. We really enjoyed your being here. Look forward to hearing about how things go for you in the future. You can drop us a note, and maybe when you're down in the southeast, you could drop us a note, or northeast, depending on whose direction.
I don't know, so we'll see.
The last two things I want to touch on very quickly under new business, unless there's anything else, is the first one is, and I talked to Trustee Little a little bit about this, but would like to see us down the road see about how we as a group of trustees would like to be a little more connected to CCW. We do have Kathy Dolan, who does a very good job in terms of being a part of the CCW. We do have our executive director who's on CCW, but we don't have a direct contact, so to speak, through our trustee group. And I'm really kind of hoping that we've talked a little bit about it. Maybe all the colleges will look for a way to have a little more contact, a person who might do the phone-ins. We don't have to go somewhere to attend a meeting. You can phone in and listen to the CCW. So think about that. No other issue tonight on it, but down the road, maybe we could figure out how we might interact a little bit more and who might want to do that. And interim studies, just a request that you give some thought. It came up a little earlier this evening, but again, I would emphasize that as the interim studies, both JEC and JAC, that you keep in mind the possibility that maybe you could work with Joe and with WAC in terms of trying to see how we can facilitate telling our story to those groups in terms of community college issues and sharing that with them, because it's key that we do that now. The whole business of working with the legislature is now forward, not waiting till December or something. So,
yeah. Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, the Joint Education Interim Committee, and there will be topics pertinent to the community college on there, and transfer and concurrent enrollment will be in Saratoga June 4th and 5th. As soon as I get an agenda, I'd be happy to share that with you. I do think it would be worthwhile to have presence there. Certainly, though, at the Joint Appropriations Interim Committee, which is June 23rd and 24th here in Cheyenne, the community college funding model will be a topic of their conversation. And so that is one, if you can break away, as soon as I sort of get the agenda of what those times would be worth having representation there.
What are those dates again, Joe, for JAC?
JAC is June 23rd and 24th here in Cheyenne.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Dr. Joey, do I recall correctly that the legislative directive to the Joint Appropriations Committee is to have Dr. Rose make a presentation of a report, I think by September 1st? Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Erickson, that's close. They're actually to take this up as early as June and then come back with either proposed legislation or changes to the funding model or recommendations and a report for another task force. And there's a variety of things, some things that should be of extreme interest to you, not just funding, but reference to growth and escalation of programs at community colleges. And there's some unique wording in there.
There's some rather curious wording.
Yeah.
About more control. I'm paraphrasing it, over the community colleges.
Yeah, controlled growth comes to my mind as well. And so it'll be worth our participation, and certainly I will be there as well as others on the staff.
well, would simply remind you that we have a most exciting time coming up with everything from nurses' pennies to graduation. I look forward to seeing those of you who can attend those different functions. I'm excited about that and look forward to being at those, and would remind you that the May 20th meeting has been moved to May 27th. And Vice President Bill Du Bois will be chairing that meeting, as I will be missing that one. And I hate to miss it, and I shouldn't tell you why, but I do have a chartered scheduled fishing trip with my son, and I'm really excited about that.
All right, good. You going to Alaska?
No, Oregon, off the coast of Oregon for some fishing there, halibut. Anyway, having said that, if there's no other comments from the public.
I do have one comment. If you're doing halibut, you better have a halibut dinner for us.
If I catch one.
I would just like to urge all of you to go to the sorbet. It is a wonderful experience and a wonderful evening. The people, it's just a delight. It really is a heartwarming thing to do.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
All right.
I wonder if we're just gonna tell her how long we're gonna stay awake.
Brad, do you have any desire to sit in on those CCW meetings?
I'm actually